Charlie Daniels, thanks for being with us, my man.
Hey, man, before you start, I gotta hand you something. You aced that back pain thing.
Did you
like
got
that? Me wanting to. Good gosh, man! What a great commercial. You ought to get double scale for that.
You know, my double scale isn't quite what your double scale is.
No, I mean, really, I was sitting here listening.
You kind of wanted your back to be worked on, didn't you?
Well, you know what the deal is. You just said that's communicating. That's what we're lacking a lot of in this country is communicating. I watch these politicians. They don't get down to the nitty gritty. They talk in circles and stuff. But that was great. I just want to compliment you on that.
It's storytelling, though. But you know what? I think about Devil Went Down to Georgia. That's storytelling. And the fiddles make it all and all. But at the end of the day, that is old-fashioned Homer or the Odyssey. You know, telling a story the way people used to around a campfire or on the back porch, the way my pawpaw would tell me stories. That before we could read and write, before we had scripts, we told stories. And I think that's still true today. The people who are good in news, Rush Limbaugh is the best on the radio. He tells stories. And that's what any good musician does. You tell stories. People still love a good story.
Well, I learned a lot about life around a coon hunting fire at night, listening to people when I was a kid, just listening to older people talk and experiences and things that they'd done before. And I mean, it was I'm with you. Of course, I come up the day before TV, and we just had radio, and people hunted, and people spent a lot of time together. Actually, sat on their front porches at night. We didn't have air conditioning, so it was summertime. We sat out, and it was a time to talk. It was a time to be a family. It was a time to talk about any problems that you had or things that you were anticipating or what was going on in everybody's life. And, the family spent a lot more time together than they do now. We tend to kind of see each other on the fly now, and I think communication is, I wish that we would be more concerned with people's communication skills, some of the kids' communication skills, teach them instead of quite as much book learning, some common sense.
Well, you're right. My son will turn 6 in a couple of days, and a big deal for us is you say yes, sir, and no, sir, and yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am. And even in the South where I live in Houston, that is rare, and people are so impressed that he does that. The other thing is you look adults in the eye because a lot of kids have not been taught how to interact with adults. So we insist you look an adult in the eye, you shake their hand. And to see a 5-year-old kid behave like this, it shocks people because it's so rare. But I tell you this, it makes such a first impression. They're naturally going to like him because of the respect and the ability to communicate like that.
Well, now, I came up that way. That was part of my upbringing. You say, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. And I still do it. And I'll call somebody, I'll see an airplane stewardess or something that's about a third my age, and I'll say, yes, ma'am. I just can't help it. It does it. I'll hold the door open for a lady sometime, and she'll look at me like funny. I don't need that. No, ma'am, I can't help it. That's just me.
Do you ever just because you feel like you should just pat her on the bottom? I mean, nothing harmful, and just no. Can't really do that anymore. Let's talk about your career.
Now you're fomenting revolution.
Yes,
man.
I am. Let's talk about your career. Your first song, as I understand it, that puts you on the map, was recorded by Elvis Presley. What was that like?
Well, it was about all the good adjectives you can possibly think of to say it. I wrote this song with a friend of mine, Bob Johnston, in Nashville on a trip that I took there to visit him, a songwriting trip, actually. We wrote together. And Elvis held it for about a year in his, what he called his singles portfolio, and finally recorded it. And, I mean, it was on the flip side of Kissing Cousins, but both sides of Elvis's stuff was hits in those days, as you well remember, I'm sure. And it was like a dream. I mean, it's like, this can't be happening to me, because I never had anything like that happen to me. I never had anything on a national level happen. And when the king, the undisputed greatest, the most influential entertainer of our time is what Elvis was. When he cut a song that I had something to do with writing, it just blew me away, man.
It had to be amazing to hear him singing that. When you wrote "Devil Went Down to Georgia," did you have any sense that thing was going to be 10% the hit? I mean, did you have a sense of that? Because I've had musicians that I've talked to off air, their biggest hit, and they go, "Man, I had no idea. It was just a fun song."
I had an idea that it would do pretty good, and I'll tell you a reason why. It was back in the day of AOR radio, album-oriented radio, and they would. A lot of were not the bubblegum stuff, what we call the bubblegum station. The top 40 stations would play a lot of our stuff, but the OR stations did. And I thought it would be good for them. I thought that a lot of them would pick it up. And I actually did two versions. I did one SOB and one SOG version. And I did one because I thought, well, if the top 40s do pick it up, they're sure not going to play that other version. So, I did two versions of it for that reason. So I thought it would do pretty good. But we're sitting here all these years after the fact, because I did that doggone thing in, 1979. And it's still the most requested song we get, and it's still a very viable part of our music, certainly, and I think Americana music right now.
What was the basis for that? Where'd that come from, just out of nowhere?
Necessity being the mother of invention. We had done written songs, we had written songs, we had rehearsed songs, we went in the studio to record them. We were ready to roll, and we come to the glaring conclusion we did not have a fiddle tune and that we needed one. Why we did not decide that before we went in, I do not know. But we literally took a break, moved the equipment out of a recording studio into a rehearsal studio, and I went in. I had this on where this thing came from, and just Devil Went Down to Georgia's in my mind. So I sat down with the band. We started, said, let's just start. Here, do something. Do this. Devil Went Down to Georgia. And everybody started, adding their ideas in, and Taz came up with that da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And we just built on it. I went off, wrote the lyrics, and we went back and recorded it. It's that simple. It was something, we needed a fiddle song, and that happened to be the one we wrote.
But some of the lyrics in that are just, they're just so out there. Where did that come from?
I don't know. It's just my style of songwriting. I mean, it's just the way I think about things. It's just, I heard Bob Dylan say one time, who I have the greatest admiration for. I think he's one of the greatest American poets that ever lived, what he does with the English language. He said, he was listening to some of his old stuff like, Darkness is the Break of Dawn and this and that and the other. He said, I don't know where I get, he know where it came from. He said, you don't think that way anymore. But that was how his mind operated at that time. And I guess it's kind of the same way with me. It used to be when I would start thinking about a song, a lot of the time my mind would start gravitating toward actually telling the story with the beginning, the middle, and the ending. And that's kind of, once I got started, I kind of, the story, obviously, you're not going to let the devil win, but, how you going to go about doing this? An old story with just a new twist to it. So that was kind of Legend of Woolly Swamp, these songs that are actually stories. That's just kind of how my mind operated at the time, was just tell the stories.
I have about a minute left, and I won't hold you anymore, but what went through your mind when you saw what happened to Hank Jr. when he went on Fox and Friends and they asked him his opinion and he gave it and then everybody wanted to trash him?
It made me feel that it solidified my thought that political correctness is just completely out here. Hank Jr. was not comparing the president with Hitler.
Of course he wasn't. Of course he
wasn't. He was making an analogy. It was just an analogy. I heard him say it, in fact, after he was making an analogy. They just, if it had been anybody else, it wouldn't have made any difference. If it had been Bill Clinton, or it could have been Eric Clapton, well, not Eric Clapton, but, Bruce Springsteen or somebody, nobody would have thought anything about it, or so, well, he's just making an analogy. But since it was Hank, and since they know where Hank stands politically, because he don't make no bones about it, man.
No, he doesn't, and I'll
tell
you
that. Hank tell you what he wants to say, but I thought it was ridiculous, and I'm going to tell you something else. Monday Night Football will never be the same without hearing him say, "Are you ready for some football?" Right. I mean, that's Monday Night Football to me.
Yes, it is. I'm in the mood at that point. Charlie Daniels, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, my friend. God bless you. Have a good trip to Africa. We'll talk to you after. And Merry Christmas to everybody in Houston.
Yes, sir. That's the soundtrack to my life right there.